Hi, I'm Mike Cavanaugh. This is another edition of Cavanaugh's Corner, the labor talk show on public access television in southern Maine. We're here in Augusta today. I'm standing in front of the hotel where the Maine AFL-CIO Legislative Conference is being held. This is early March, and today some 70 or 80 local union members from different local unions around the state of Maine are coming together to spend a day in Augusta talking about the legislative process and meeting with some of their legislators and state senators. So we're going to go on inside and listen to some of the speakers and interview some of the people who are here to find out what are Maine workers concerned about with this legislature and how are we going to try and have an impact in this session. So with that, Richard, let's take the camera on inside and let's spend the morning with the AFL-CIO Legislative Conference.
Back in the early 80s, a long-time business manager for the telephone workers local here in Maine, Jim Mayo, retired from Local 2327 and went on to win an election to a seat in the Maine House of Representatives. Unfortunately for all of us, Jim had only been in 6 months when, unfortunately, he passed away as a result of a heart attack. And out of that tragedy, however, we did gain Jimmy's son Joe as the representative from Thomaston, who ran and won a special election to fill his father's seat. And after serving a number of terms in the Maine House, where he was 100% with us as a voting member of the Maine House, Joe Mayo moved on to become the clerk of the House when the state fossil retired. Without further ado, I give you our very dear friend and the clerk of the Maine House of Representatives, Joe Mayo.
Thank you, Ed, for those kind words of introduction. I wanted to come this morning especially because I've always cared very deeply about the union movement and recognize if it was not for the union movement, the great middle class of this country would not be as it is today. There are problems, of course, out there in the economy, but union movement, as my father always reminded me, didn't take me very long to learn and understand it. The union movement helped build this country and made it what it is today. So it's my pleasure to be here with you this morning. Yesterday I was looking through some old legislative record and I came across my first recollection of a debate in the House that was quite striking. It was the debate in 1984, which is the year after I was elected, on the minimum wage bill. And to let you know how important one vote is, that bill passed in the Maine House of Representatives by one vote. It was a very modest increase, but it was a tough fight. It was 10 cents an hour over 3 years, for 3 years, for a total of 30 cents. But that one vote, I always felt, and still feel, was my vote. If I had not been elected in that special election a year prior, that bill would not have passed. And that modest little increase for the people that work on the minimum wage would not have happened. And I also know it wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the efforts of the AFL-CIO and other unions that were active in the State House. Eddie Gorham, I remember especially, I was quite upset about the failure of the minimum wage, and he consoled me and encouraged me to keep working, and we did ultimately go on to pass that. With those brief words of introduction, let me start and try not to bore you too much. I always try to follow former Senator Mitchell's advice to stop speaking before you stop listening. I hope I can do that this morning. We handle approximately 2,000 pieces of legislation in the 2-year period that the Maine legislature sits. That is an extraordinarily high number of pieces of legislation. And when people ask me about that, I remind them that most of the legislation that's introduced and that we process is a result of requests from constituents. Legislators don't sit down and think all these things up on their own. They think some of them up on their own. But the vast majority of pieces of legislation that are introduced in the legislature are the result of a phone call from a constituent. And many people sometimes scoff at some of the bills that are introduced into the legislature. And I try to remind those people that this is citizens of the state's only opportunity to have their day in court, to have their idea heard. Many of the ideas the legislature does handle are trivial and maybe insignificant in the grand scheme of things. But please also remember that they're important to some people. We had a bill just last week that dealt with establishing the state dirt. You probably heard about that. I can't even remember the name of that dirt. But there were, in fact, 20 people who came to the State House from all parts of the state of Maine to testify in favor of that legislation. They're people that care very much about dirt, and it was very important to them. I don't know what's going to happen to that bill. I'd be very surprised if it does pass, but the legislature is there for the people of the state of Maine to have their voice heard. And we run a very open operation. Compared to other states, Maine has probably one of the most open and most democratic, if you will, with a small d, institutions, legislative institutions going. Every single action the legislature takes is done in public. There is nothing that can be done secretly and revealed later on. It all has to be done in public. There, of course, are negotiations and discussions that happen behind closed doors, but when the committee votes and when the full legislature votes, it's done so in public. And every member is accountable for that vote. And they're accountable because when they speak on the floor of the House, the staff person from my office takes down every word, or we record electronically every word, and she transcribes every word into written form. So you can see, in fact, what your member said, your own state representative said while they were representing you in the legislature. And when we have a recorded vote, that vote is available from my office, usually within a minute or two of the closing of the vote. So you can see how your member voted. You can see what they said before they voted, and you can see in written form how they actually voted. Members of the legislature pride themselves on the decorum that we follow. You would go to a legislature in many states and would be surprised to see members milling around, talking, reading newspapers, drinking coffee, and not paying any attention to who's speaking. When the legislature is in session and a member has the floor, all members have to at least pretend that they're listening. The legislature is quiet. No other member is allowed to speak out loud. And when they're in the chamber, they have to be in their seats. That's something that Maine is known for nationally, and we pride ourselves on that decorum. It really all ties back to colonial days. Of course, Maine was part of Massachusetts when the United States was born, but we get our heritage from Massachusetts, the way we deliberate. It's tied to direct democracy, direct representation, the town meeting form of government, if you will. The legislature is, in effect, a large town meeting. And that's also why the legislature is as large as it is. That's the New England tradition, very large legislative houses. The House being, of course, 151. Not as big as New Hampshire, with 400, but nonetheless one of the larger legislatures throughout the country. So a legislator gets a phone call from a constituent, and I'll use a bill that, to take you through this process, use a bill that was... Yes, sir?
More an opinion, perhaps, but as far as the public hearing process, what would be your opinion from your years of experience as to how important the public hearings are, or to what extent do you think senators and representatives come in with their minds already made up and it really doesn't make any difference at the public hearing?
I'm a firm believer in the ability of the general public to impact the legislative process. Cynics would not agree with me, I'm sure, but I have seen the impact that a constituent driving from their home to Augusta to talk to a member of a committee. I've seen people switch their votes based upon contact from their constituents. It happens all the time. A public hearing can be extremely important in terms of passage of legislation or defeat of legislation. If no one comes and says yay or nay on a bill at a public hearing, the committee is going to feel free to do whatever it feels. But if a member of the committee is sitting there and 10 constituents are there from their district saying in unison, vote for this bill or vote against this bill, that member is going to be swayed by that, absolutely. So when you're trying to impact at the committee level, it's my advice to you to get people from those members' districts. It really didn't impress me too much if someone from Madawaska called me up on the telephone and asked me to vote for a bill, because Madawaska was the other end of the earth for me. Obviously, it meant a lot to, or would mean a lot to current Representative Ahern, because that's his hometown. Someone from Thomaston called me up, came to see me. It certainly had an impact on my vote. Yes, out there.
And I give you Brother Chickle Leary.
Good morning. Joe on first because, as Eddie said, he had to get back to run the shop at the House of Representatives. But I want to welcome you here, first of all. I see a lot of new faces, some old faces. I stand with the old faces because I've been around since 1968. Seen a great many changes in the legislature since that time. The legislative process that you're going to be talking about throughout the day and viewing today is really the culmination of what we and you do through your locals and through the AFL-CIO. It is the final result of the process. I want to talk a little bit about the beginning of that process because it's so important to the outcome. Our COPE director, Ken Morgan, who ordinarily would be with us today, can't be here today because he has been visited by the flu, which many of you have, some of you have been unfortunate enough to have this winter. And I can't remember a conference of this type that Ken couldn't make. But I'm sure that he'd be pleased if I talked a little bit about the process prior to getting to the legislature. Part of the process that we are from the AFL-CIO, when with your locals, whether you're in Fairfield or Madawaska or Waterville or wherever, part of that process is the recruitment of candidates. Much of our success in recent years has been the fact that we have been able to recruit candidates from the rank and file of the AFL-CIO to come down and represent us at the legislature and to represent their home district. As was mentioned earlier, Joe Mayo's dad was a member of IBEW, was a business agent for many years, and when he came to the legislature, he brought that experience with him. That experience is so important to bring to the legislature, a knowledge of workers and what goes on in the workplace. So we try to do a fair amount of recruitment of getting membership to run for, when they can, for legislative seats. We have had members of the iron workers and the paper makers and the machinists and the railroad workers and a great many people that we've been fortunate enough to recruit. And those people are the people frequently that end up being our best advocates and our best spokespersons. When we can't recruit our own members, we reach out to the community and we depend upon you to tell us what you know about the individual who's running for the legislature and what we who are down there on a regular basis can expect from this individual. So we will be coming back to you at the beginning of every legislative election year and asking you about people in your community, either to recruit them or to recruit from your own membership or to tell us about the people that are running. And once we've done that, as many of you know, we have a COPE convention where you send delegates to that convention, and then the AFL-CIO as a body will formally endorse people to be elected to the legislature. And that is a second part that's very important as far as our involvement in the entire process is concerned. Once you have met then in a COPE convention and have named who you want the AFL-CIO to support, then we become wholeheartedly involved in the campaign. And whether that is raising money for candidates or making contributions to candidates or working on behalf of candidates physically, putting up signs or mailing letters or what have you, we try to become very involved in all of these campaigns. I think frequently about campaigns. When Mike Pearson, who was running for the Senate one time, told me that he saw Bruce King and the Carpenters putting up signs in his district at 6 o'clock in the morning one morning. And candidates have a way of remembering that. And we have a way of reminding them that we did it. So that becomes a very important part of the campaign also. Many of your members will receive a letter from me generally saying these are the candidates that the Maine AFL-CIO COPE Convention has endorsed, and these are the candidates that we think you should vote for. And out of some 50 or 60,000 letters that we'll send out, I'll get maybe 5 or 6 back that come back to me with a note written on it that says, listen, you fat son of a bitch, don't tell me who to vote for. It's usually a friendly note like that, and I'm always glad to get them in the middle of a campaign. But the great majority of people realize that we are not telling you to vote for these people because we like them. Matter of fact, we don't like a lot of them. Many of them we do like my good friend Senator Buston back there. But we're telling you to vote for these people because based upon our interviews, based upon what you have told us in the community, based upon what we can find out about those people, we think that they are going to be the best candidates to move Labor's agenda forward. And that's why we're endorsing them. So we campaign for them, and then we try to get as many people out to vote in the election and to vote for co-endorsed candidates as we can. Once the elections are over, then we have the process that begins with adding up the numbers and see what we're looking at. And when they added up this year, they didn't look too good. We found that we had a very, well, first we found that we thought we had a Senate that was going to be Democratic and a House that was going to be Democratic, and then we had a Senate that we thought was going to be maybe Democratic, maybe Republican, we didn't know. And what we ended up with is a Senate that has Republican leadership and a House that has Democratic leadership and an independent governor. So we have our work cut out for us. But all of this, in all of this process, I can't overemphasize one thing, and that is the importance of you as a member being involved in this process. As Joe said, it means an awful lot when you as a member come down and meet with your senator or your representative and they know you from back home. Eddie and Ned are there every day, and they know generally pretty much what they're going to say. Ned now lives in Hollowell. Eddie lives in Raymond. What's the name of that town?
Randolph.
Randolph. Yeah, never can remember the name of that town. But unless the people that they're going to influence are the representative from Randolph or Hollowell, and maybe in Ned's case, because he came from Portland, he might have a little clout there. Generally, what has a great impact is if somebody comes down and goes head-to-head with a legislative representative or senator, and they know you come from their district. That means a great deal. It also means a great deal to have your local as a member of the Maine AFL-CIO. There is legislation that may or may not be considered this, it hasn't surfaced yet. We have defeated right-to-work legislation in the state, by my count, on 7 occasions. Right to work is that piece of legislation that doesn't really give you the right to work. It gives you the right not to pay union dues. And if you don't have the right to pay union dues, you're taking away from the Treasury and cutting into the cost in arbitration cases and undermining unions. And this was the intent of that legislation. As I say, we have defended it many times, and we've defeated it in referendum once in the state of Maine. That may surface again. My point is that the State Federation of Labor always has had right-to-work legislation. Your locals belong to the Maine AFL-CIO, whether your paperwork is a machinist or what have you, because you choose to do that. And in some cases, because your Constitution requires you to do it. But that is of tremendous importance to have you involved in the Maine AFL-CIO, and I want to make that point. You are, through that process, and we are, as the Maine AFL-CIO, the only advocate for workers in the state of Maine. The only advocate for workers in the state of Maine is the Maine AFL-CIO and its member unions. And it is because of that that we have been able to build a background of labor law in the state It isn't because some representative or some senator thought it was a good idea in 1930 or 1940 or 1970. It is because we have been advocates for workers from day one, from our existence. So we are advocates for workers, and we are the ones that are responsible for unemployment insurance, for workers' compensation, for safety laws, for the minimum wage, for the right of public employees to engage in collective bargaining. None of those things would have taken place without your involvement and the involvement of your locals in the process. And so my children and my grandchildren and your children and grandchildren will always have a heritage of some sort of protection because of what you and your forefathers and foresisters did in the past to make sure that we were involved in the process. And we can all be thankful for that.
Pieces of legislation dealing with health insurance. One heard the other day by Representative Joe Carlton from Wells, who is an assistant Republican leader in the House, attempts to deal with the issue of the high cost of health insurance. Everybody knows that the premiums on health insurance are too high, so his answer for dealing with the problem was to bring in a slimmed-down basic health care package with a small $5,000 per person deductible and plan. Sounds good to Joe. I don't know how good it sounds to you folks or how good it might sound to your members, but Joe was one of those guys who made his millions in the real estate boom of the 80s and get out just before the market turned sour. So he's happy as a pig in you-know-what, and can't understand why people are having trouble paying their health insurance premiums. Big issue for us is going to be privatization in the public sector. And I say for all of us because it's not just the members of the Teamsters and AFSCME and SEIU, who are the principal state unions, who are going to be impacted by the move toward privatization. It's going to be all of us because we're going to feel it in our pocketbooks. Wayne Hollingsworth from SEIU, the president of the MSCA, can address that issue at some point in this conference if he wishes, but right now there are thousands of contracts out there in the private sector that have been awarded by the state to private sector enterprises, be they private, nonprofit, or for-profit corporations or entities, that account for tens and tens and tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in taxpayers' money that's going out for personal services, that is going out to pay these people. The state has no idea how many of those contracts are out there or how many thousands of people are on the payrolls of those organizations that are out there, or the terms and conditions, or what the terms and conditions of their employment are. Senator Kiefer from Aroostook, the Senate Republican leader, has a bill in to create a privatization council to find areas where the state can contract out, privatize even more services than what they're doing now. Brother Hollingsworth and others from his organization rightly pointed out to the committee that before they start awarding more contracts, perhaps they should try to get a handle on the existing thousands of contracts that are out there and do some kind of an audit or accountability review of those contracts to see whether or not the taxpayers of Maine are getting enough bang for their buck out of these contracts. The kind of a bang for a buck that privatization holds out as the promise for doing the dirty deed, but that is often not there. Workers' comp, there's not an awful lot that we have in the area of workers' comp in this session, nor have we seen an awful lot yet from the other side. That's not to say that we don't want to change workers' comp, and that's not to say that we need to change workers' comp, and that's not to say that we aren't going to change workers' comp somewhere down the road. But with the Republicans in control of the Maine Senate and Angus on the second floor, any kind of meaningful workers' comp reform to take care of some of the injustices that have been visited upon our members as a result of so-called reform packages in the past, the chances just aren't very good this session. We do have a bill in dealing with occupational disease in an attempt to get the occupational disease law essentially wiped out and have all occupational diseases treated as though they were injuries. The occupational disease law is a separate section of the workers' comp law that basically forces injured workers to jump through a series of hoops that all but guarantee that he or she will never collect under the occupational disease law. It's a system that's designed to fail, with injured workers and ill workers coming out on the short end of the stick. We did pick up a convert the other day in Senator Georgette Barabee of Lewiston, only because of a constituent problem. She has a constituent who's a nurse who works in a nursing home who has contracted AIDS as a result of her employment. She's currently getting some medical benefits, but she again is one of those who will be hurt under the occupational disease law, who will be unable, or her family will be unable to collect under the occupational disease law, and hopefully Senator Barabee will help us when that bill gets to the floor. There are a lot of things that we deal with that we watch sometimes. As I said, last week we had one day when we were covering 6 different committees up there. Oftentimes there are issues where we would like to get involved, but in the absence of any clear directives from the rank and file or from the executive board, we sometimes just watch those from the side and try to ambush them, if you will, without getting directly involved in either the public hearing or the work session. One of those is a bill, one like that is a bill that's coming out of the Banking and Insurance Committee dealing with consumer affairs. It's called a bill to repeal the prohibition against prejudgment attachments in consumer cases, which means that, for example, if you fall behind in your payments to Pomelos for your colored TV, before you know it, the sheriff could be showing up with a lien on your house without any opportunity for you to get into court to state your case. In the past, in consumer affairs cases, the creditor could not get an attachment on any of your properties or possessions before going into court and having a hearing. This bill will permit them to grab whatever you got and then go to court, and you can have a hearing to try and get it back. This is a fundamental alteration of consumer protection policy that's been the law of this state for about 30 years now. It's not, I don't think you're going to find it on this list. This is just typical of some of the things that are going to be coming out of the legislature, both as a result of the philosophical shift to the right, and at the same time, the overwhelming turnover that we had in the legislature approaching 50%. I mean, 2 years ago, this bill would have been dead upon entry into that Banking and Insurance Committee, and this time the bill is walking out of the committee arm in arm with the chairs in the banking lobby, and nobody has said boo about it. Well, we have. Maybe we can still kill it or get the governor to veto it. But this is the kind of thing that we're going to have to be watching for across the board coming out of every committee, because there has been such a fundamental shift in the attitudes of the people down there. Now, maybe in some issues that's going to be good, but so far the only thing we've seen coming out of it are things like this prejudgment attachment bill. So our interests spread from more than just workers' comp and labor committee issues to other things that are going to adversely impact our members as well. We want people to know about these things so that they can't come back later and say, geez, why didn't you guys do something about this? Why didn't we know about this? Well, we'll watch as much as we can and do as much as we can, but to the extent that we can keep you folks educated on those issues and get your help, the better off we're all going to be.
Problems facing public employees in this session of the legislature. The biggest problem, again, is the budget. We have another budget shortfall and a no new taxes governor. We've had budget shortfalls over the last several years and have fought hard to protect people's jobs, not only at the state level, but at the local level. Local public employees are affected very much by the state budget and education funding and municipal revenue sharings and a number of other ways. It's going to be even harder this year. There's over 1,000 jobs that are on the line, and there's tremendous pressure to cut from the Republican leadership in the Senate, as well as from Governor King. This also affects our services at the state level and the local level. The things that may happen in mental health and retardation are very scary. The AMHI and BAMHI are being, quote, downsized, and people being sent out into the communities and for community-based mental health without a real good, strong network being in place there. Never mind, 400 jobs going out the window, which is, a tremendous hit. But we don't know what's going to happen to the people involved. There are a number of tax issues, and there's a handout that may be on your table that talks about Maine's tax system that I encourage you to take a moment to read about. But there are a number of bills in to roll back taxes this year at a time we have a several $100 million budget shortfall, which we don't think is a good idea to roll back taxes at this time. And for the most part, they're Republican-sponsored initiatives. Some of them would simply shift the tax burden from upper-income, wealthy Maine citizens to lower-income and working Maine citizens. There are several bills to reduce the income tax. There's some to reduce the sales tax, which in better times would probably be in support of, or if we could expand the sales tax base to close some of the tax exemptions, we could reduce the sales tax. But none of these bills speak to that. They are measures designed to get the Republicans on record as supporting reduced taxes at a time when really it's quite irresponsible to even be discussing it. It's just not fair to the Maine people to be misleading in this way. We're short several $100 million. He talked about privatization. There is this proposed new council on privatization. In the private sector, you call it subcontracting or contracting out. We all think of it as union busting, and we've got to work very hard against the scams that are coming out. One of the bills said the assistant majority leader, I have a hard time saying that, Beverly, about the Republicans in the Senate, but the assistant majority leader in the Senate has a bill in to privatize public employees' pension system, the Maine state retirement system, which is just appalling. There's no limit to the number of appalling bills that are appearing in our bill packets every day this year. It's very difficult. A few years back, Senator Buston sponsored a bill to protect the assets of the Maine state retirement system, protect people's pension. And we talked about it ahead of time. How far do we go? We decided to write a bill that said that the assets of the system couldn't be rated. And it won passage at the polls overwhelmingly. I think it was 70% of the voters supported passage of that amendment. Well, what we've seen since that time are attempts by Governor McCann and others to reduce payments to the schedule, reduce all sorts of ways that the retirement system is administered, and reducing benefits at the same time. So we have another, Senator Buston, I believe, is it your bill, Beverly? There's another bill in to further protect the assets and inputs into the retirement system so they can't fool around with people's pensions any further. We have the worst funded retirement system of any public employee retirement system, one of the worst in the country because of repeated raids by Governor McCann and others. In the area of welfare reform, there's a number of bills in that basically kind of assaults on people who are on welfare, people who are on unemployment. And we have to keep a close eye on some of these bills, not only because of the people that are affected and the humane questions involved, but also there are a lot of bills that are talking about welfare work that are simply ways of replacing public employees' jobs with people who are on welfare and bringing them back in with no pay, no benefits, and calling it job training. And meanwhile, a lot of our folks are out on the street. We have to be very careful that welfare to work is not, welfare to work minus our members. So we have to keep a close eye on that. The area of health care, which has been such a hot area, we've done some really good.
My name's Chuck Frazier. I live in Pittsfield, Maine. I belong to the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 1253 out of Augusta, Maine. I'm an organizer for the Brotherhood. I've been organizing for almost 3 years now.
Okay. Chuck, let me just ask you, you're up here with the other members of different labor unions talking about the legislature and politics. What do you think is the most important issue facing workers up here in Augusta this year?
Well, the fact that with the changeover in state government, with the Republicans controlling the Senate now and the Angus King being the new governor, independent governor, now sort of leads towards being conservative, but since he's made all his money, the attacks that labor is facing from this conservative legislature.
Okay. So you feel like maybe this is a start today, having 60, 70 people up here, workers, to talk to legislators?
Yes, it is. We have 70, I'd say, leaders here today. The problem is getting our constituents, our rank and file, active in this process too. I know it's a problem. I come to these and I go back to my rank and file and I try to get them to do stuff, and it's tough. So we have to continue this education process because to convince our membership that this does work. They have a hard time relating to the fact that if I call my state rep or my state senator, they're going to listen to me. But they do, if enough of them call, one person calling it might not make a difference. But if we can get all the unions that are represented here today to get their, I don't know about a majority, but a good number of their rank and file calling these state reps and state senators
Can make a difference.
can make a difference.
Good. Okay. Well, thanks very much, John. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay. Let's go on and let's turn off the camera, Richard. Union Legislative Conference. What's your name?
Terry St. John, Local 29.
And where are you from, Terry?
I'm from South Portland.
Okay, and you're up here with other union people today talking about the legislation. Why do you think this is important? Why did your union members send you up here for the day?
Because they realize that the bills enacted by the legislature in the Senate are going to impact us, not only today, but in the long run, impact us as well as our children and grandchildren.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think is what are some of the more important issues that you're facing right now, that you think your members are facing?
Well, I think worker replacement. I think minimum wage, although it doesn't usually affect union people because we're usually well above the minimum wage. Unions have historically always championed the smaller individual guys, and that's basically what we're all about. Workers' rights, rights of families, and members of other working environments, not necessarily union members.
Okay, well, good. Thank you very much, Jerry.
You bet.
Appreciate it. Okay. Let me ask you a couple of quick questions. First of all, who are you and where are you from,
I'm Charlotte Gurney from Waterville, work at Kai's Bible, Local 449.
Okay, so Charlotte, you're up here with about 70 or 80 other union people today talking about the legislation. Why do you think this is important? Why are your members sending you here today?
Well, because I'm a member of the executive committee, and we wanted to know what's going on in the legislature, and it's very important for our labor laws. I mean, we work there and have to live under them, and there's a lot of important issues right now.
And do you think you can have some impact here with some of your legislators?
I think all of us can.
Yeah, okay.
I hope we can.
Good. Well, you're going over this afternoon to talk to some of your
we are.
legislators from the Waterville area?
Yes.
Good. What would you think would be if you had to pick one, what do you think the most important issue is right now for working people in the state of Maine?
No, I think the strikebreaker issue is a real big one.
Okay. Well, good. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
See? Isn't that family?
There was a question. Yes, getting back to the minimum wage, I want to get an education here myself. Every time we increase the minimum wage, do we lose jobs? And in this day and age, will they shut down? Is this causing them to shut down certain factories and go to Mexico the way things are set up now?
It's a very good question. I thank you for answering it. This is really not an economics class. It's supposed to be how to communicate with your legislators, but that is an important question. That is the old saw that's dragged out every time we talk about increasing minimum wage. The fact of the matter is there is no empirical economic data to support it. In fact, what has generally happened every time the minimum wage has gone up, and this dates back to 1935, by the way, and today's minimum wage has actually lost ground because of inflation. It is worth less today. It is worth less today than it was 8 years ago, even though we had an increase in the interim. Now, what oftentimes does happen is that initially when an increase in minimum wage goes into effect, there has occasionally occurred a temporary dislocation of workers. Not those above the minimum wage, but sometimes very small places may not hire somebody that they were about to hire because now they're going to have to pay 35 cents or 50 cents or 70 cents more. It is very short in duration. Those of you who are interested in this want to know the studies. The Bureau of Labor Education is about to go to press on one of our fact sheets. Many of you have seen our fact sheets on a variety of issues. We're developing one. It's going to go to press in about another week to 10 days on exactly the data about minimum wage. And it shows only the temporary adjustment of the economy and what it makes. And the fact is that over the longer term, after about a 6-month period, there are new jobs actually created. The most recent study involved 2 contiguous states, 2 border states. New Jersey was one of them. One state increased the minimum wage, the other state did not. Provided scholars economists and others, sociologists, a perfect laboratory to take a look at what happened. The state that increased the minimum wage actually ended up gaining jobs because the overall disposable earnings generated by people in that state provided many more people with the earnings, the disposable earnings, to go out and eat more at some of those very same fast food restaurants that were complaining about paying an increase in minimum wage. In other words, low wage earners and their families don't get the opportunity to go out and eat. Rarely. They can't afford it. But when they get an increase in minimum wage, maybe now they can enjoy the luxury of taking their family out, but they still can't go to places like DeMillo's. It's too expensive. They can't go to places like Pilot's Grill. It's too expensive. But they can at least take their kids out to someplace for an evening out. And so, you know, they go to some of the very same fast food restaurants that are the biggest opponents of increasing minimum wage. And in this study I'm talking about involving New Jersey, it shows that their business actually improved. And those of you who are interested in the fact sheet, as soon as it comes out, we'll be making an announcement about it. You'll hear about it. I hope all of you know where to contact us at the Bureau of Labor Education. We're going to make it available to Ed and Ned for distribution to the legislature, along with some of the other fact sheets we've developed. And so if it's an area that you're interested in, we'll certainly make sure that you get a copy of it, because it's a very compelling argument. It's one of the things that we can do in our own state to improve economic development. Increase the disposable earnings of people. Any other questions on that? On that or
Well, just on this here, why I asked this question is, you've been preaching to us about when we go down to a bill to have the information and know what we're talking about. That's why you gave me some answers right there that we'll stick with.
Yeah, and I'm glad you asked the question. Any other questions? Yes.
You do research on particular issues that you might be interested in, or people on the shop floor, or people you associate with. There's an example. There's 4 books on unions in the Lewiston Library, and I've read all 4 of them. That's as far as it goes now. Is there research facilities available through the AFL-CIO? Can they give you a bibliography, point you in the right direction, wind you up, and go for it? Or?
Yeah, you know, all these fact sheets that are developed with your tax money through the Bureau of Labor Education, all are footnoted. How many have seen fact sheets on a variety of subjects? We've done them on ADA, we've done them on workplace discrimination, and so on. They're all footnoted with, you know, additional resources and citations, so you can document what you're saying. In addition to that, there's lots more material available. I just want to thank you for that question. I want to take this opportunity to say, you know, for a very small investment, your local union can buy a book. Buy Barry Bluestone's book for $20. Your local union can buy a book and donate it to your local library. Get some stickers made so that they know that the book, The Food for Minds, came from your local union. It's a real investment in our future, and it helps young people understand.
Okay, Jim Andershaw. I work at Nisson's Baking Company. I'm the financial secretary of the Bakery, Confectionery, and Tobacco Workers in the state. It's Local 334, and we're out of Portland. And we represent the workers of Nisson's Baking Company and B&M Baked Beans.
Right, okay. And so you're up here today representing those workers and talking about the legislative process. And what do you think the real important issues are for your members?
The most important ones that I really like to do as much as I can to get my members involved with, of course, are the strike replacement issues. But just getting people out to vote. We have almost 500 members in the state, and you know, I dare to say if we can get half of them out to a major election, we're doing good. And trying to educate the other 250 and getting people out to vote on every issue. Regardless of how you vote, just getting out to vote on every issue is important. So, you know, this just gives me some more things to feed back to them.
Okay, and you're going over to talk with some of the legislators this afternoon? Anything in particular that you want to see anybody about while you're here?
Actually, there's a little issue that involves the Nissan's baking plant, which isn't exactly a labor issue, but it does affect our workers, and that's it's been in the news in the past month, is the emissions from bakeries. The levels that they're trying to cut back on. The cost factors involved with Nissan's could cost a lot of jobs and would cost Nissan's almost $1 million. And although Country Kitchen is a non-union competitor, it would also affect them and just workers in the state of Maine. It's a Maine issue, and that's one of the things, if I have the opportunity to talk about, I will.
Okay. All right, well, very good. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Enjoy lunch. Okay, let's see if we can at the AFL-CIO Legislative Conference. I've got a few guests with me here. You guys want to just identify yourselves, where you're from, and why you're here?
My name is Wayne Hollingworth. I'm president of MSCA SEIU, and I'm here to attend this conversation to help better everyone in the people of the state of Maine.
My name is Ken Dietrich. I'm the coordinator for AFSCME in the state of Maine. And my purpose here is to try and get legislators to pass legislation for public employees rather than against public employees.
Okay. And we've met this guy before.
I'm Ned McCann with the Maine AFL-CIO. My job is to beat legislators about the head and shoulders in order to get them to see our point of view.
Yes. There we go. There's one for the editing room. And
we're going to go turn up the volume.
Wayne, let's just talk for a second about the major issues that you guys are facing in the state budget. Both you and Ken obviously are concerned about the state budget. What do you see as the most critical short-term issue that you've got to deal with up here this afternoon?
One, we're talking about layoff of state employees. We're talking about the cost on the state budget. The governor is talking about laying off and getting rid of the liquor stores. This will cost state government $24 million a year in taxes. We're concerned about that loss of revenue. We're concerned about control of the liquor. That's one of the short-term things that we're looking at. And we're also very leery of this whole privatization, contracting out effort by a number of people in the State House.
And Ken, I know you guys represent not only state employees, but a lot of municipal employees as well, right?
Yes. The budget's going to affect both state employees and municipal employees. Our main concern at this point is the budget. I mean, the budget itself, the dollar amount, where it's going, what it's going to do. This municipal aid for municipal governments and cities and towns and school departments is just not enough money to run them. So what we're going to see is a twofold attack on our part to the legislators who are going to be here this afternoon to try and convince them to fully fund both the state budget for state employees and the municipal budget, the school budgets for municipal and school employees.
Okay.
That's what our attack plan is.
Okay. And Ned, let me just ask you one question about an issue that I know labor's been involved in quite a bit, and you personally have been involved in, and that's the Maine health program, which we're still sort of being debated and going to be voted on this week, right? You sort of talked to us a little bit about where are we at with the Maine health program.
The Maine health program is scheduled to expire at the end of March based on last year's negotiations to keep it alive for one more year. There's another effort that we're involved in with some coalition partners to revive the program once again. It got caught up in the the supplemental budget negotiations as a budget item, as it should have. The governor did not push for it at all. In fact, he pushed against it, as well as the Republicans in the Senate. They worked out a compromise, supposedly, that provided prescription drugs for a short period of time for people who are still on the program. So that is coming out as a bill out of the Human Resources Committee. They'll be on the House floor on Thursday. In addition, there's a separate bill that came from the Appropriations Committee that did not want to handle this hot issue. So they cut it out through the Human Resources Committee, which is to continue the program through the end of the fiscal year, which had been our original position, to do that and then fight for the program once again in the biennial budget. So the bill came out of committee with a 7-5 vote. The Senate Chair, Joanne Pendexter, was not present for that vote. So it's going to be on the House floor on Thursday, I believe, and it should be a very close vote.
Okay. All right. Well, these are some of the issues, at least, that labor and working people are facing in the legislature this session. A lot of these folks are going to be going over to the State House this afternoon, talking on behalf of the members that you represent, and we'll continue this show a little bit later and see how we fare in dealing with our legislators. So let's go grab lunch. Thanks.
the spot, but I think it might be good for some of the members to hear about some of the issues that the other members of the Labor Committee are working on. And Roland, if you don't mind, I'm going to pick on you. Talk about the strikebreaker bill and other stuff that you're working on.
Okay. One bill that's going to be presented the 17th, which is St. Patrick's Day, is the strikebreaker bill. And I was going to sponsor that bill, but Doug Aher and Madawaska beat me to it. And some of the communications got piled up, so I never did get to put one in. I'm co-sponsoring that bill along with a lot of others. Being the person that was affected by it, I know that it's wrong to firsthand to permanently replace a worker when you're on a legal strike. And as most of you know, the United States is the only country outside of South Africa in the modern world that allows that to happen. We're going to have I'm sure, a lot of debates over it. Last year I worked 6 months for paper workers on putting pressure on Cohen, and I know some of you folks did too. I spent a lot of time trying to convince him that he ought to vote for cloture and let it come to a vote in the Senate. Well, it didn't. It didn't happen. So it was killed. There's going to be a lot of arguments whether we should bring it up in the state or not. Well, my conviction is that if there's something wrong out there, then you should do something about it. And I don't care what the laws of the state of Maine or what labor laws are. It's wrong to permanently replace people on legal strike. And I think as workers, we understand that. Listen.
Just like you said, $5 an hour is no money. You can't raise a family on it. Why are there so many people against, in the federal government, state level, raising the minimum wage up to $5?
I can't answer that. When I was on strike, I talked about, developing my own business and so forth. And I preached a lot to my kids who were in high school at the time about paying decent wages and so forth. At one point, I was going to develop a little business centered around a sawmill, because I've got some wood lots and so forth. And I mentioned, hiring somebody at $7 an hour. My daughter, who was a senior at the time, quickly said that, Dad, I thought you said it took $10 an hour to get by today. So I'll never forget that. I know better. To take my daughter to straighten me out. I was starting to become a businessman all of a sudden, trying to cut wages. And in reality, what I was preaching was right, and she understood it. You've got to pay somebody a decent wage if you're going to hire them. And I don't know what the answer. I think the answer to a lot of our problems is education. We don't spend enough time educating the public.
So, I'm Dennis Norton. I represent the workers at the Hannaford Brothers Warehouse, where food commercial workers. And this is our biggest, more than pet peeve, because they're doing to us exactly what you're talking about right now. They're bringing in, out of a company of, you figure they go from Maine, now they're down all the way to South Carolina. They got a workforce of approximately 20,000 people. 75% of that workforce is part-time. And, it's devastating. So for the few of us that are full-time, you can imagine what we're envisioning in the next few years. So this is something very much on our agenda. Hopefully we'll bring it forth and maybe put something through these halls that will make that work.
And this is something that Hannaford, as a corporation, is quite proud of. When we went on our legislative tours, we visited Hannaford Brothers, and I specifically asked them how many employees do they have in Maine, and they said approximately 7,500. And I said, well, how many, or somebody else then asked how many of these employees are part-time. And they were very, very, very vague. They said, 3,000 or 4,000. They didn't quite pin it down. And then someone said, well, what kind of policy do you have as a company for people who want to stay with the company and make it their career and move up the ladder and get a full-time position there? And they said, we don't look at what happens when you have a full-time position becomes vacant. How do you fill it? And they said, well, we don't look at it that way. We take that position and we turn it into 2, maybe 3 part-time jobs. So they're very proud of the fact that they're creating more jobs
Full employment bill.
The problem, of course, being that nobody can live on these positions, and they save a tremendous amount of money in benefits, et cetera, et cetera. So it's certainly, I would like to see Maine Labor probably have some type of a focused workshop on this very issue, because as you said, the future is with us now, and we're in terrible trouble.
That's an issue that would have been dealt with, or could have been dealt with, on any one of the several attempts at national labor law reform over the last few years. If these people are working fewer than 20 hours a week, which most of them are, they are by definition ineligible to vote in a representation election supervised by the National Labor Relations Board for the selection of a collective bargaining agent. They can't vote in an election. 20, 30 years ago, when A&P and First National stores were the big supermarkets in Maine, about 80% of the full-time help, 80% of the help was full-time. They were principal bread earners and wage earners in the family, and they worked a 40-hour week, and they were eligible to vote in elections. And guess what? Those stores were organized. Now that the workforce is 80% part-time, and by definition ineligible to vote in an NLRB election, it should not surprise anybody that these stores are underrepresented. So it has nothing to do with, it has less to do, I suspect, with the reduced benefits and reduced wages, and a lot more to do with avoiding unions.
So that really concludes this evening's show. We've spent the last hour talking with and listening to some of the representatives of Maine workers who have been spending this day in Augusta talking about and then talking to legislators about laws and bills that are of importance to Maine's working people. This has been a legislative conference of the Maine AFL-CIO. We've had 70 or 75 worker representatives from different local unions around the state of Maine. We took a day off work to come to Augusta and talk about how the legislature affects them and affects their members. So this is, I would urge our viewers, if you're interested to follow a little bit more about who the legislature is and how they're going to deal with issues that affect working people, to check out the Citizen's Guide to the Maine Legislature, a reference booklet about who the members of our legislature are. This has been produced by the Maine People's Resource Center and can be gotten through calling our office. Call Cavanaugh's Corner at 284-4471. We'd be interested in your thoughts and your comments about this show, and we look forward to talking with you again on our next opportunity to film at Cavanaugh's Corner. Thanks. Okay.
I'm an attorney from Skowhegan. I've spent a good deal of my life working mostly with unrepresented people who work in shoe shops, wood turning mills, and some electronic facilities up in Somerset County. They get sort of the trickle-down benefits of what organized labor has done for them down here in Augusta. Without organized labor, they would have nothing. They get two benefits, Social Security and workers' comp, and in the process of taking one of those away. So I like these people. I enjoy representing them. When I campaigned, I spent most of my time at 6:30 in the morning at those factory gates talking to them. I think they don't fully understand what organized labor has done for them. They don't have any voice down here. They have no voice down here except for the voice that you people speak with. You are so important to them. You may only represent 15% or so of the labor force, but in a sense you represent the whole labor force. And they don't pay you any dues. They can't afford to pay you dues. But they get the benefits of what you're doing down here, and it's touched my heart. So, I'm concerned. I'm on the Labor Committee. I'm proud to be there. One of my concerns is to try to put together